Well, the Terminator franchise is back, and like all previous Terminator entries, there are some controversial decisions made and a lot to discuss. So let's dive into Terminator Dark Fate. Terminator Dark Fate stars Linda Hamilton, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Mackenzie Davis, and is directed by Tim Miller. What is up, guys? Halloween is over. Got the Evil Air backdrop back to its norm with a little bit of Christmas flair because, you know, we got the holidays coming up. But we got a new Terminator movie. Already there's some buzz about what's going on. If you remember, oh, by the way, this will be a spoiler review before I go any further, okay? Because it is Monday, and I figured, you know what, you guys have had a lot of time to see this movie if you wanted to see it, so I'll just give you a spoiler review. But for those who have not seen it, I would definitely say, if you're a fan of the franchise, this one is definitely worth your time, and you are dismissed. Unless you just want spoilers. Some people like spoilers. My daughter actually will read the last page of a book before she starts it. It's weird, I know. But if you remember, I did an update about Edward Furlong coming back to the franchise. Keep in mind, I didn't really know that much. All I was reporting on was an article that came out that said there will be some involvement of Edward Furlong. And after seeing this movie, we know that the beginning, John Connor is killed right off. By the way, I saw this movie twice. I saw it again last night, and I'm glad I did, because that opening scene, when you see it for the first time, it is so jarring. And it is a con for me. The way this scene was handled, it's a con, but also it's a necessary con, because what they're trying to do with this movie is set up the notion that, okay, we're done with John Connor. The guy has had so many chances before this movie, and they just cannot seem to get the guy right. There's always some kind of issue with the character of John Connor. And to me, and I even told Edward Furlong this personally when I saw him at Spooky Empire back in March, I believe. I said, to me, you are the quintessential John Connor. You're the only John Connor that gets it right. And funny enough, you were a child at the time. So after watching this a second time, it wasn't as jarring. But like I said, it's a punch in the gut to see this iconic character, you know, in the form that we enjoyed at the time, to be just shot point blank by the Terminator in 1998, some 4 years after the events of Terminator 2, because that one did take place in 94, because it took place 10 years after the first Terminator, even though it came out in 91. Are you confused yet? And one little nitpick I would say is that John Connor would look a little older, I think, 4 years later. But it's not something that bothers me too much. Also, the scene that they open the movie with, where we see the clip from Terminator 2 and Sarah Connor, she's in the institution, and she's talking about Judgment Day, and she does her freak out. It's an iconic Sarah Connor moment. That scene worked perfectly to set up the tone of what this movie was going to be like. It's going to be the return of Sarah Connor. This isn't an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. This is a Linda Hamilton movie. And she is badass in this, actually. I enjoyed seeing the return of Sarah Connor after, I think, 28 years, something like that, if I do the math right. And for such a long time period, she slips right back into those Sarah Connor shoes perfectly. She is great in this, actually.
That's what everyone calls me, yes.
I'm never gonna fucking call you Carl.
And I think her entrance is perfect too, because you have this amazing freeway chase scene. Already we've established that the character Grace, which we will get into Grace, is a force to be reckoned with. She is definitely a badass from the future, and she is protecting Danny. And she's holding her own against the threat of the Rev 9. So all that's going on, and then she's getting her ass handed to her. And so in comes Sarah Connor. She's strapped to the teeth with ammunition. She's got the rocket launcher. She's got like the 50 cal, and she's just owning the Rev 9. So this is a great entrance. You know, you can tell that this is a very seasoned Sarah Connor. She's spent her life hunting Terminators. You know, that is her purpose in life. She's excommunicado from the states. You know, she's wanted in all 50 states, so she's bouncing from place to place internationally. But then you have those nice tender moments throughout the movie where she's talking about what she has went through over the past some 30 years. I love the scene where she's actually talking to Danny, and she's talking about how she doesn't have a photo of John. You know, she was so protective of her son that she never even kept a photo. So I think in essence, this movie does honor John Connor. And I think that's why it requires a second viewing, because you're so jarred by the killing of John Connor at the beginning of the movie that you don't really get time to soak in that this movie does really pay honor to John Connor, the character himself, you know. And you have that beautiful For John moment. You know, it's mentioned a few times throughout the movie that, you know, Sarah Connor would get these texts from the character Carl, played by Arnold Schwarzenegger. And the text would say For John. And of course, we will jump more into Carl too, because what they did with the T-800 in this movie, very interesting. Okay, so now let's talk about the new Terminators, Grace and Rev 9. I will admit, from seeing the trailers, and I believe I did like a trailer reaction too, and I said something like I wasn't impressed with Grace and Rev 9. Didn't know their names at the time, by the way. They just didn't look that interesting. It looked like more of the same, you know, because you're comparing it to all the previous Terminators from Terminator 3 and on. They were good. It surprised me. I was really into, especially the Grace character. This was a character that was given a backstory, you know, a good, viable backstory. She was a child in the future war, and this is a different war because remember, Skynet has been defeated by Sarah Connor and John Connor. So we don't learn from our mistakes. And then Legion is created, which is pretty much Skynet 2.0. Grace is in the midst of all that, and she volunteers herself to become an augment, which is a person who is upgraded, pretty much. I guess you can think back to that movie Upgrade. She's pretty much like what Logan Marshall Green was in that movie. But Mackenzie Davis did such a great job fleshing out this character, not trying to copy every other version of the Terminator seen before, but making it her own. And she didn't get in the way of the movie at all. You know, she was a very important character in the movie. By the way, this is the 6th movie in the franchise, so I think from a writing standpoint, they did a great job on Grace. There are some issues in the writing in this movie, but I really enjoyed Grace. Rev 9, another one that really impressed me. First thing that really jumped out at me with him was the CGI. In the trailer, the CGI looked worse than the T2. And you know what? The T1000, everybody always brings up the CGI in the T1000. And I think that worked so well because of the limitations of technology at the time. Sometimes limitations are a good thing. Now we have all these tools at our fingertips, and sometimes we overdo it. And there is definitely some of that in this movie with Rev 9. But in context, I actually didn't mind the CGI too much. It's definitely not perfect. There are some times, especially in the like high action, high movement scenes, you can definitely tell that it's CGI. But it all comes down to really the character, and I enjoyed what Gabriel Luna brought to the character actually, because he tried to harken back a little bit to the T-800 and to the T-1000. I think he handled the like robot movements very well. But really at the end of the day, he was a viable threat. Very dangerous. Definitely an upgrade from the T-1000. I mean, he could split into 2 Terminators. So it's like you got like the T-800 version of the Terminator and then the T-1000 all coming at you at the same time. Some pretty badass stuff actually. So I liked the Rev 9. I thought he was pretty cool. Now the one character that's the prey in this movie is Danny, played by Natalia Reyes. She really is what Sarah Connor was in the first movie. And the twist here is that she's not going to have this son that's this great soldier. It's her. She's the one that is like the leader of the resistance. And I know in this day and age, with the women's movement and, you know, women are great and all that stuff, people are going to poke at that. But if this movie came out 5 years ago, we wouldn't be having this discussion. So that's the one thing about this whole movement that does kind of irk me. She's just a character. And I think it worked really well. I mean, hell, you look back, Sarah Connor was a very strong woman. So to me, that didn't even matter. But again, this is a character that was given a good, strong arc. There are clues in the beginning of the movie that she is a strong woman. She is motivated and she pushes forward and she reacts quickly to any kind of danger that's coming at her. But she's very green in the beginning of the movie, as she would be. And so by the end of the movie, she does have that Sarah Connor arc. She does have to stand up against the Rev 9. But overall, I liked her, and it was cool that she had Sarah Connor there to back her up, you know, saying, hey, I know what you're going through. I've been there before, so I want to help you. That was really Sarah Connor's purpose in this, is helping her. Now, if I could like interject a con into this, because we're on like the core characters, Sarah, Danny, and Grace. Grace is a heinous bitch. I just watched 10 Things I Hate About You recently. To Sarah Connor. And I think it's needless because Sarah Connor saves her ass. And then after Sarah Connor saves her ass, she's just constantly a bitch to her throughout, I would say, most of the movie. And I'm wondering, like, from a writing standpoint, why they would go that far with that. I know she's wanting to protect Danny, but it's clear that Sarah Connor is wanting to help with the situation. And she's like over 60 years old. So Grace telling her that, you know, she would easily kill her or whatever, I thought it was a little bit too far. Now, before we get into Arnold, I want to talk about the action sequences in this. I think it's a huge pro with this movie. And I think the reason the action sequences work so well is because they build the characters up before the action happens. And then they give you really strong action sequences. There's, I believe, 3 really good ones in this movie. The first one is at the automotive plant. And this is where we're introduced to the Rev 9 and really Grace. You know, and the fight sequences, the choreography. There's a lot of like hand-to-hand combat in there. And that's the stuff I really love in Terminator movies. Then you have, of course, the great freeway chase. But the last act in this movie I thought was so freaking badass. And this is a good transition into the Arnold character. And it's a reason why I wanted to talk about this before I talked about Arnold. Because Arnold really is a big part of why that last act is so freaking awesome. It really is. It starts off with some trouble, though, because they're on this plane. And the plane is earthbound. And so you know that these characters, maybe not the Terminator characters, but Danny and Sarah would be freaking toast. They would have been dead. Your suspension of disbelief has to go a long way in that sequence. But once they get to the dam, you know, the kill box, as they call it in the movie, that scene works so well because of the emotion in there. You have all these characters fighting together against the Rev 9. And I like that too, that they're all working together. You know, you have the T-800, you have Grace, and then you got Danny and Sarah, the human characters. But it takes all of them to beat the Rev 9. You know, there's no way that Grace alone could beat the Rev 9. There's no way that the T-800 could beat the Rev 9, but all of them together, it works perfectly. And then you have that beautiful ending, actually, where the Terminator, the T-800, gives his life. And he says, for John. I almost got a lump in my throat when he said that because it reminded me of T2 when he does, you know, the thumbs up at the end. So it marries up to T2 quite well with that. Now let's get into Arnold real quick. This was very interesting. When they meet Arnold for the first time in this movie, of course, Sarah Connor wants to rip his head off. She wants to kill him. This is the Terminator that killed her son. So there would be a lot of emotion there. And Arnold was definitely the comic relief in this movie. He was really funny, but it really posed a question like, what does a Terminator do after he has completed his mission? And this is a Terminator that completed his mission over 20 years ago. So he has to find a purpose. And so what he does is he just helps out this family for like the next 20 years. Now you could definitely pose some questions like, he's hiding the fact that he's a Terminator from this family. He doesn't have a physical relationship with the mother, which after 20 years, I'm not really buying that. But I was really scared about that at the beginning. But then once they fleshed out what was going on with him and leading into that last action sequence, I actually enjoyed him. And the reason being is because of the acting by Arnold Schwarzenegger. We always give Arnold crap for his acting abilities, deservedly so sometimes, but he does a great job as a Terminator. He really does. And thankfully, he brings forth these comedic moments here and there to kind of relieve the tension. I really liked him in this, actually. And they don't show him until over an hour into the movie. But, you know, I just rewatched the first Terminator, and comparing the first Terminator to this Terminator, this T-800 is like night and day. But, you know, it explores the Terminator lore a lot further And some people will definitely have problems with his portrayal in this. But is it logical? I think so. I do. You know, it all depends on what's in his CPU, I guess. And it's AI at the end of the day, you know. And there is technology that is like learned technology these days. We are in a time where robots, machines, are actually taking the place of humans for a lot of jobs. They even address it at the beginning of the movie in the automotive plant. Now, one more con I definitely wanted to stress, and it is in the writing department, is there's a scene at the detention center, which is another cool action sequence. Getting the Rev 9 from a security standpoint into the detention center was lazy ass writing. And this is coming from someone who served in the military active duty for 24 years. No way in hell would that freaking Terminator get through the checkpoint without showing ID. No way, I'm not buying it. Full of shit. And this happens not only once, but twice. Because he gets through there, and basically all he says is, you know, his rank, and that gets him in there? No way. But then he's going through another checkpoint. He's saying he served 2 tours in Afghanistan. He's got a metal hip. And so they just let him go. Coming from a military guy, that shit irked the hell out of me. Because I know, especially in this day and age after 9/11, and yeah, you can say there's no 9/11 in this movie, but this is at a detention center at the border. I guarantee his security would be way high. But overall, guys, at the end of the day, I was quite pleasantly surprised with this Terminator movie. Did not expect that. I'll definitely give it a high humdrum. Some definite problems in the writing department. I think they could have handled the John Connor demise a little bit better in the beginning, but I think it was necessary. But yeah, high humdrum. So post in the comments your thoughts on Terminator Dark Fate. Looking forward to hearing them. Also, be sure to come over to Killer Flicks, where we talk horror all day and every day, and on Fridays we do Free For All Fridays. Follow me at Drumdums on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Have a great day, and Drumdum out.